Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Ray Leonetti, and I'm the Associate Director of Policy at the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University. And it's my pleasure today to be here with all of you, as well as my co-moderator, Durand, and my co-panelists, who will be introducing themselves to you in a moment. And I really want to thank everyone for being part of this Cities for Inclusion Disability Summit today and for being here with us to celebrate inclusion. It's been a privilege of ours at the Institute to be part of the planning committee for this summit, so we're really excited that you're here. So today, I have the privilege of being with these fine folks to talk about using our voices to create positive change. So I am going to just take a moment to go through a little bit of information about the Institute on Disabilities, a little bit of information about how we think you can get some tips and tricks for how to use your voice to create that positive change. But then I'm going to turn it over to these folks. And the reason for that is that they have the lived experience. They have experienced talking with their legislators, talking with their policymakers, talking with decision makers, and creating change in the disability community. So I want you to have the opportunity to hear from each of them. So just a little bit about the Institute on Disabilities. The Institute on Disabilities is Pennsylvania's University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. And what that means is that we are designated by the federal government to be one of 67 university centers across the United States that provides information, resources, research, education, and service to people with disabilities and their families across our state. Our vision is a society where all people are valued and respected and where all people have the knowledge, opportunity, and power to improve their lives and the lives of other people. And this, as I mentioned, is using your voice to create positive change. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about why this idea of using your voice is so very, very important. We're going to talk just very briefly about what the legislature is like in Pennsylvania so that you can carry that into your work. We're going to talk about some advocacy tips for how to be good advocates when you go to speak to those legislators, policymakers, elected officials, even when you go to something like an IEP meeting, you can use these tips. And then, as I said, we're going to hear from these folks about their lived experience doing this work. So why is this important? Like, why are we devoting a whole session to talking about using your voice to create change? Well, for several reasons. First, because legislation that happens today can impact your young child, it can impact you as a person with a disability, or it can impact you at some point later, because disability is one of the only groups that is like equal opportunity. So any one of us at any time can become part of that marginalized group. And as we tend to get older, it can happen, okay? Why else is this important? Because all of you that are here today, you're not just family members, parents, self-advocates, people with lived experience. You're more than that. You are a constituent of your state representative, of your federal representative, of your senator, of your school board member. You are a constituent, and that means that those elected officials, those policymakers, they work for you and your family. It's not the other way around, right? Like, you hire them, so to speak, by electing them, and you can fire them by saying no thank you when their term is up, right? So your vote matters. Why else is this important? Because legislation, and we'll hear more about this in a little bit from one of our panelists, but legislation often starts from the ground up. Somebody might have an idea that they write on a scrap of paper or a napkin or the back of a folder, and eventually it can become legislation. So any one of you have the power to create legislation. And lastly, one of my favorite things, knowledge is power. So I'm so glad that all of you are here today to hear from this stellar panel. So this may be review for some of you, but I'm just going to hit it quickly because I think especially around this time of the election, we can't mention this too often. The Pennsylvania legislature, what does it look like in Pennsylvania? So we have a Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and we also have a Pennsylvania State Senate. The House of Representatives works on 2-year terms and has 203 members, while the Senate works on 4-year terms, so that means people get elected every 4 years, and has 50 members. And then, of course, we have our executive branch of the government, which is our governor and lieutenant governor, Shapiro and Austin Davis, and they work on a 4-year term. So the legislative process in Pennsylvania, I'm just going to go through this quickly, but these are some things that you need to know. The Pennsylvania legislature gets over 4,000 pieces of legislation that might be introduced in a given year. So later, when you hear from Lisa about some of the work that she's done, I think you're going to be very impressed. The legislative process is very long and it can be very arduous. And sometimes you need to introduce a piece of legislation more than one time before it becomes a piece of legislation that is passed. Pennsylvania's legislature is different than some other state legislatures in that it really looks very similar to the way things are set up in Washington, D.C. So we're like a little mini microcosm of Washington, D.C., but not all states are like that. And that's something to keep in mind when you look at what other states are doing as far as legislation. So advocacy. We've been talking about this all day, but this is just one definition of what advocacy is. And all of these folks have had the opportunity to do this before. So, at least according to one dictionary, advocacy is pleading or arguing in favor of something, a cause, an idea, or a policy that you actively support. So each of these fine folks are going to tell you about a cause that they have actively supported and how they advocated around it. So these are just some tips that I wanted to share with our attendees today about how you can become a better advocate and a better educator with your policymakers, elected officials, and decision makers. Keep in touch with these elected officials, right? So after this presentation today at about 3:15, 3:30, there's going to be a legislative hearing in this room. So there's going to be a lot of members of the House Democratic Policy Committee as well as some other invited elected officials that are going to be here. And the reason why they're going to be here is because they want to hear from the public. They want to hear from people just like all of you. So take that opportunity to stick around, to meet them, to talk with them about the issues that are important to them. Once you start to build that relationship with your elected official, send them information. Send them information about things that are happening in your community that are important to you. Things like this summit, town hall meetings, action alerts. Because you want to keep reaching out and repeating that touch. So building a relationship with your legislator or your policymaker is not just a one-time effort, but it's something that takes an ongoing reach out. Because if you stay in the front of their mind, then when something important comes up that impacts people with disabilities, you're going to be in the front of their mind. That goes to our second tip, which is to build that relationship. So every chance you get, every time you see Representative Hohenstein, for example, walk up, say hello, shake his hand. because he wants to know that you remember him, you see him, and that the work he's doing is important and appreciated. Use your network. So all of these folks that are here on the panel with me, all of them have participated in various programs at the Institute on Disabilities, having to do with learning how to advocate or speak to the legislature. So I know that I can count on these folks, right? So these are all part of my network. Duran, Z, Lisa, Bill, all part of a larger network at the Institute on Disabilities and across the state. And remember that you can educate your legislature. How do you do this? Well, there's so many ways. You can do it by mail, although now we're more of an email society because since things have changed in our world, sometimes sending handwritten letters to Harrisburg or Washington, D.C. is not effective because the mail is so delayed. So email is great, though. You can do it by phone, you can do it in person, or virtually. And then last, because I want to give most of my time to these folks, these are just some helpful websites that you can use if you want to reach out to your own elected officials, right? So we thank you for listening to that. I'm going to go back to the beginning here, and then I'm going to ask each of my co-panelists here to introduce themselves, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what this work looks like in action. So Duran, would you like to go first and introduce yourself? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'd rather go for the ladies to go first.
Oh, okay. That sounds fine then. All right. Z, since it's your birthday, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm Zaire, also known as Z. I'm from the Philadelphia area. I graduated from LaSalle University in 2020. I'm a self-advocate, and I graduated from C2P2. I also was diagnosed with ADHD and autism at the age of 8, and I've been advocating for myself since college. I participated in giving panel presentations to employers, students, and professors. I was a part of a legislative group at C2P2, and I interned at the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities.
Thanks, Z. Do you want to tell us what C2P2 stands for?
C2P2 stands for Competence and Confidence and Partners in Policy Making.
Great. Thank you. Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Aquila, and I'm a resident of Northeast Philadelphia, a constituent of Joe Hohenstein's, and I'm the perfect example of advocate turning into community member. Anyone can have a disability at any time in their life, and I help to advocate for a bill in Pennsylvania to bring disability inclusive curriculum to K-12 schools. I'm a member of a nonprofit organization called Disability Equality in Education.
Now, Duran, what do you think? Should we let Bill go before you, or? Okay.
Hi, my name is Bill Krebs. I'm a self-advocate. I live in the Northeast Philadelphia. I went to school with Joe, so I know how he was. I could blackmail him in some ways, but I never do that. I got into advocacy coming out of high school. Didn't have a voice, but look at me now. So when you're a self-advocate, the psychologist said your kid has an opposition defiance disorder. But what is an advocate? We're just advocating for other people and ourselves to help people. So we can't be labeled opposition defiance disorder when we're who we are.
Thanks, Bill. Duran?
Hi, everyone. Is this thing on?
Yep, you're good.
I'm Duran. I'm a senior here at Temple's LNCS program. I'm an advocate for the Spanish community. I've been diagnosed of autism and ADHD at the age of 2. I was nonverbal at the time, and now look where I'm at LNCS, becoming an advocate and a senior for LNCS program at Temple.
So LNCS is our Leadership and Career Studies program, right, Duran?
Yes.
which is what, a 4-year college program for people with disabilities?
Yes.
Cool. And I'm lucky because Durand is doing an internship with us this semester and doing policy work. So this presentation came at the most opportune time, so I'm very lucky. Okay. So I'd like each of you now to share a personal story about an opportunity that you had speaking to a legislator or about a bill that's important to you. So I think we're going to start with Bill.
Thank you. My thing was, we have the sexual predator list out there for sexual predators, but what I wanted to do is to make sure that people who worked in the system, who abuse our loved ones, who work in residentials, in case they hurt somebody, because people with disabilities are afraid to speak up and speak out when things happen to them because they're afraid they'll be threatened to be put in places like Pennhurst. Pennhurst was an institution out, what is it? King
In
of Prussia.
Springfield, Bill?
What's that?
Springfield.
Yes, out where King of Prussia Mall is, outside there. So they were afraid they'll get put back in institutions, those who didn't live in institutions. So what we wanted them to do is make a list of people like that who hurt our loved ones or hurt us, that they would never work in the system again, that their name would be on a list and be banned. So they can't get away, and just the provider says they'll go on. But then they wind up in another group home doing the same thing that nobody talks about. So I went to my legislature and talked about how we should be improving this bill. It's not a bill yet. It's before they make a bill of it, to bring it to the floor, to make the governor sign it when it comes a bill, so people are protected. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you for sharing about the importance of the registry and the work that's being done around that. Z, I think we'll go to you next. Do you have a bill or an experience that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, during C2P2, I took part in a group advocating for Bill 661, which aims to increase wages for direct support persons to help people with disabilities across access home and community services. People with disabilities want to live within the communities with the low cost housing and assistive living services. I want to emphasize the importance of advocating for services as a person with a disability and discuss why home and community-based services and employee rights are crucial to advocacy efforts.
So I was lucky enough to be there when Z was in Harrisburg talking about the importance of home and community-based services with other self-advocates in her group. And I can say that I think the group really made a difference because some of the legislators that we talked about were not as familiar with the importance of home and community-based services as others. So Z and her group did a really fine job. Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name's Lisa Aquila, and I'm here today representing Disability Equality in Education. We're known as DEE. And I'm here because I advocated for the groundbreaking legislation in Pennsylvania to introduce the idea and brainchild of Alan Holdsworth to include disability curriculum into K-12 schools. And Alan is a longtime activist and also our director of our nonprofit organization. So I'm an average citizen, and yet I was able to take part in a historic, groundbreaking legislation for Pennsylvania and for disabled people. But I didn't do this alone. I was just a pebble in the water, and I started a ripple. But when everyone came together, it was then that we were successful and able to make a wave and achieve something great. And the disability inclusive curriculum was passed not just as a bill, which we had hoped for at first, but even better than that. It was actually placed into the omnibus budget and became part of the Pennsylvania Code, thanks to the governor. And right now, 10 school districts across the state are participating. And they're learning about disability in positive, natural ways in all subjects and in all grade levels. And this is for all students, disabled students and non-disabled students. They'll finally have the opportunity to learn about disability the way disabled people want them to. And any one of you have the power, as Jamie said, to change policy, and you could be another pebble in the water just like me. Because I learned that the key to success is to share your story, just like I did. Everyone has a story, and believe me, stories are so powerful. Tell your story to get your needs met. Tell your legislators, tell your policymakers. You can change a law, you can get a bill passed just by telling your story. And my story is, I was a home care worker, and many times I had the opportunity to travel to the Sill for Independent Living here in Philadelphia called Liberty Resources. And when I was there with my consumer, I saw many conference rooms named after people such as Justin Dart, Ed Roberts, Wade Blank. Well, I've never heard of them before, and I wanted to learn about them. So I figured if the conference rooms were named after these people, they must be pretty important. And I did some research, and I realized that these were great leaders, and they had accomplished many things. But yet, I never heard about them. I never was taught about them in school. So I wanted to help Alan change that. And my friend Stacy in the audience here has a photograph, the signing of the ADA. And anytime you Google search an image for the signing of the ADA, you'll see President Bush in the Rose Garden on July 26, 1990. And the picture shows two gentlemen on either side of him. They're seated in wheelchairs, and nobody knows their name. And they're Evan Kemp and Justin Dart. They're a part of history, the thread of our nation, but children aren't learning about them. But that's what we need to change. And, you just have to remember that your legislators work for you, but you have to work along with them to get things done, just like I did. I went to my state representative, Joe Hohenstein, and I asked him to help me introduce this bill. Now, notice I said I asked him to help me. You have to work with your legislators, and they'll work with you. And Jamie mentioned, giving some tips for doing this type of work. And I always say, remember your ABCs. A is always tell your story. B is be persistent. And C, change will come. We advocates can't accomplish this alone. And I told my story. I invited others to tell their story. We made a video about it. We formed a coalition for disability inclusive curriculum across the state of Pennsylvania, and we have members beyond Pennsylvania. We are really building a movement. So if you want to get the attention of your legislators, tell your story. And we want to make sure that the lessons that students will learn and the lessons that teachers will teach in the classroom about disabilities have been approved by people with disabilities. We always say, nothing about us without us. That's at the heart of what we do. And that's very important, to have a seat at the table. We don't want children to learn about disabilities without us being a part of those lessons and resources. I hope that at the end of this session, you'll come to the table on the left side of the room and sign up to be part of our coalition, because there's a lot of work to be done yet, and we need your help. So remember the 3 tips. A, always tell your story. B, persistent. And C, change will come. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing your story and for also including the Institute on Disabilities in the good work that the D Coalition is doing. Durant, I think you have a few questions for our panelists, yes?
Yes, I do.
All right, you want to start with one for Bill?
Yes. Bill, tell us about your advocacy issue and tell us about your new advocacy issue that is important to people with disabilities. And what are you doing to help the policymakers learn about this issue?
Well, we talk about everything under the sun that concerns people with disabilities like regular people. We wanted to be treated like everybody else. You know, when we talked about the ADA, we realized the ADA was only signed for people with physical disabilities. People with intellectual disabilities were always left out of the community. So when they talked about, when Joe said storm the castle, and you seen that video, it was everybody who had a physical disability. It wasn't people with intellectual disabilities. So we wanted to be counted too as everybody else and treated like everybody else. No difference, no way. You know, we realize that with people who are autism. They get in trouble, you know, they get high functional, they come Asperger's. People with intellectual disabilities like me, what are we? We're troublemakers because we're too high functional. You're not supposed to be in a system. You're not supposed to be helping other people like yourself understand what goes on. But they're the ones that did it to me. They're the ones that made me part of committees at the state level or at our local level. Got into city politicians when a lady named Marge Tegnoon was my ward leader, you know. And like I said, I even went to school with Joe, you know, and he hasn't changed a bit. You know, he has issues. He has a disability too, and it's hidden. Like mine, people think, what are you doing here? So for being what we do, we support each other. We need each other. We need to be there for each other, no matter what disability you have or what, to group together. We fight together, and we'll all die together. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for reminding us how important it is that we're all in this together and that we need to be cross-disability. Do you have a question for Lisa?
Yes, I do. Lisa, what is the one challenge you faced in working and getting to a piece of legislation passed? And how did you work through the challenge?
Well, I think the challenge was finding the hero. And the hero was State Representative Hohenstein. And then State Representative Hohenstein's challenge was to find another hero. And he went across the aisle and he found Jason Orchite. And our cause, if you will, was a bipartisan issue. And that's how we won the passage, with a bipartisan vote.
That's great, Lisa. It's so important to have disability champions, so thank you for highlighting that. Duran, do you have a question for Z?
Yes. Describe an experience that has improved to your advocacy skills.
Navigate,
Yep.
an issue that pretty much defined my advocating skills is navigating the job market. With the disability, taught me to advocate for myself by emphasizing that my disability does not define my abilities and expressing my need for patience instead of micromanagement. Despite biases during interviews, I also had to assert the value of my skills and achievements. This experience taught me to be persistent and confidently challenging misconceptions while educating others on my strengths. As a result, I have improved my advocacy skills and can effectively demonstrate the value of my unique perspective and resilience to any team.
Thank you, Z. Thanks, Duran, for those really thought-provoking questions. So the last thing I have on my list here is for the rest of our panelists to share some tips with you, like Lisa did. But before we get to that, I'm just wondering if anybody in the audience has any thought-provoking question that they would like to ask our panelists. If you do have a question, I'm going to ask that you raise your hand or somehow indicate that, because we need to get a microphone over to you so that the people who are on the live stream can hear your question. Any questions for any of our panelists? Yes, Sherry.
I came because I work with a lot of youth who we are trying to help encourage them to just be advocates for themselves at things like their IEP meeting. And I find sometimes that people are quite often a little fearful and scared or not sure how to communicate the right words or the right way to advocate for themselves. And so I want to show youth how to kind of find their voice, whatever way that needs to be at a younger age. And just wondering for the individuals on the panel, what were some of the opportunities you had that help you feel confident and feel able to advocate for things that you're very passionate about?
Go ahead, Z.
I can actually go first, and the thing is that you have to have someone that advocates for you, such as I had my mother who basically advocated for me like the entire time, because my famous saying is that if you're not going to, if you don't have someone to advocate for you, you're not going to advocate for yourself. It's pretty much it. And then also making sure that you are consistent with the person that you pretty much hit the nail on the head kind of situation. Not literally, but figuratively, but whatever. So make sure you know exactly what you want for your child, and make sure your child knows exactly what they want, because you need to make sure that you're able to teach a student how to like advocate for themselves, because when they get like high school and college, they're going to be having to be able to lead by themselves, so they should be able to. And you need to make sure that the student knows that this is what I want and this is what I don't want, and I need you to make sure you stick and be consistent and making sure that you're not veering off, because you need to make sure that the student is being advocated for, and make sure that you're consistent, and make sure that you are the pain in their butt to make sure that they get exactly what they need.
And Z, I can say you are really taking that to heart, because a few times today you were really working that room. Boy, you knew who you wanted to talk to and you made sure you got to them, right? Great. Anybody else want to address that question from Sherry, Bill, or Lisa, or even Durand? Experiences that you've had?
As me, as a self-advocate, you know, you realize that I have a voice. I didn't always have a voice that I have now. And they think self-advocates learn from other self-advocates how to speak up and speak out and know what's right and what's wrong. My thing was I met somebody who worked in the system. Would you believe that? Who willing to give me a chance. I pushed the person away so many times. I belonged to this thing called the PAC. It was the Planning Advisory Committee when Ed Rendell was our governor, and Kevin Casey ran the Office of Mental Retardation Services, and it's not the R word anymore. I tell people it's the Republicans. That's the R word. But he came over to me so many times, and one day I accepted his offer, and he sat with me and helped me understand, you know, that I had a possibility. I didn't have a disability. Look at what I can do, not what I can't do, and show me what I can have, and fight for what I believe in, and don't let people push you around. And I asked him, why would you do this for me? He said, you have potential. I see it in you, but you won't let it out. So when we go to meetings like ISP meetings and you don't understand, bring somebody that knows what's going on to help your loved one to understand. Make it simple words, you don't know, make it alphabetic soup or jargon that people don't understand, because it could be one thing in one system, it could be another thing in another system, and we're all confused about what goes around comes around, right? So like I said, and then I sat up there and I graduated. I went to the Governor's Affair for People with Disabilities. I even went down to Washington, D.C. to Barack Obama's Committee for Intellectual People with Disabilities on his second term. It was great. You know, here you are making yourself feel important, making you part of the community, part of everything. So when you're doing things, make sure your loved one knows what's going on. Don't ever leave them out. Don't talk for them. Let them talk. Say, hey, it's my loved one's meeting, not mine. I'm here to support them when they struggle, when they get scared, just to hold them, that they know they reinsure them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, quick disclaimer, this is a nonpartisan panel.
You can pay me off later, Jamie.
Yeah, okay, Bill. Anything you want to share, Lisa, before we go to another question back there?
I just want to tell everybody, you don't have to have fancy words or anything like that. You just have to speak from the heart. And I had some practice advocating years back for home and community-based services. So I was able to feel comfortable in doing this type of thing with the disability inclusive curriculum. And just a little plug, if you don't mind, Jamie, I'd like everybody to invite a teacher or a student to visit our website, disabilityequalityeducation.org.
Thanks, that's a great plug. Duran, did you want to add anything before we take another question?
Yes, I do. Ooh, make sure I got this correct.
You got it. You're good.
Okay. Make sure everybody hears me correctly still? We're all good? Okay. Growing up in my culture, from being a minority of the Latinx community, we didn't have in our culture disability. There was never that term was never existed. It was like consider not taboo, but like hidden that can never be found. Now it's my option now as an adult in my 20s to let that out in the open and like open that door for more, to expand that more, not just through my culture, but like through disabilities as well.
Thank you, Duran. So important. Do we have another question back there? Yes.
Hi, I'm an occupational therapy student that goes to Thomas Jefferson University. I was just wondering, how can we as students or just, ordinary beings help advocate for people with disabilities?
I could probably take this one.
Go ahead, Duran.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please? I could it's like here because of the air.
Yeah, that's fine. I was wondering, how can we as students or just ordinary beings of society help advocate for people with disabilities?
That is like basically up to them. Basically, like find their personal interest. Pardon me. Find their personal interest or try to find something that motivates them, because it's important to get them to get to know you, because most people don't know you like that. And this is my biggest problem I have for years is trust issues, because I can't trust nobody, because I was I was had that problem growing up, trusting the new people and changes. But now as an adult, I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to expand that horizon more and go try to trust new people, meet new faces, try to talk to legislators or people in politics. And I'm trying to work on that now. Let that comfort zone go to try to get rough and dirty and try to become reach for the gold.
So what I think I hear from you, Durand, is that non-disabled people can help with the cause by building trust with people with disabilities, right? Cool. Anybody else want to take that one? Z?
I can also add to this. This is actually a really good question. I have presented I presented a presentation at LaSalle University for this specific thing, and it's basically you need to be able to realize that the person with the person is trying to like tell you something, you need to 100% advocate for that person with what they're telling you, because sometimes people would not feel as though they're not. If the person with a disability, in my perspective, feels as though you're not listening to them, they're not going to want to like tell you anything. And also, it's also to make sure that you are asking a person like what they feel comfortable with, because it's based on comfortability, like inner circle, like making sure, because some people, they don't want to be touched, but some people, they need to be like touched to basically guide them, but they need like a guide with like a step-by-step situation, not really like telling them kind of situation.
Thank you, Z. Bill or Lisa, do you want to add anything before we take a question from Suzanne back there?
I would just add that you can speak, you can advocate, not for them, but with them, and that's something to remember.
My thing is, to be a good listener, to care about somebody, respect their decision, no matter if it's a wrong decision you think is wrong, and they know it's right. Agree with them, because I remember my first keynote speaking on top of a stage, and there was over 500 people, and this lady wrote my speech, and I'm looking at it and said, "This ain't me." She said, "Oh," and I ripped it up. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm scared to go up there." She said, "Don't worry, everybody's naked." You heard of that saying, right? So I started unbuckling my tie and unbuckling my shirt. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I want to join them. I don't want to be different." So don't treat anybody different than they are. Respect their decision, whatever they do.
If I need a joke, I can always count on Bill Krebs. Thank you.
That's the naked truth.
All right, so I think we're going to grab a question from the back, and that may be our last question for the day, I think.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor, and I work for Government Relations Department at Special Olympics International. And one of the questions I have is just for background information for you all. We lead an event on Capitol Hill every year where we do advocate to members of Congress. And I'm just wondering, have you ever found yourselves in situations where someone has used offensive language to describe your disability, in a conversation, or, maybe they used handicapped or, disabled or, non-person first language, and how you kind of overcome that, and if you overcome that, if you do or if you don't, or how, I guess, we can make that transition and help our athletes with intellectual disabilities kind of be in those situations where they feel comfortable correcting or, suggesting that that was offensive, or, just trying to figure out what those ways and strategies could be.
Oh, Duran, go ahead.
I could say that I was called a lot of times the R word growing up, mostly from middle school and high school. So that was one of my pet peeves, and it's still to this day. Most people don't know on our campus, we're learning every single year, we're banning that word. I think it's like month of April, March, if I can recall. We do a petition every year to ban the word, the R word, basically. So I do it every single year, just like to make it 100% accurate, make sure to ban the word. Another term I could say too, another way I could say it too is that try to use other words besides handicapped, disabled, the R word or whatever. There's words in a dictionary. We just gotta learn how to say it in a sentence and expand your vocabulary, but not that type of way.
Thanks, Duran. And if I can just add to that, I would say, because the person who asked the question, I heard you mention person first language, which is very popular with some people, right? But there's also disability first language, which is now popular with some people. So I think, as a person with a disability myself, it's important to find out how the person that you're speaking with likes to be identified or recognized, because that may be different person to person. And I think it's perfectly okay to ask about that. So thank you for the question. Z, did you want to say something about it real quick?
Yeah, I'm pretty much one of them people who do not mind. I pretty much say I have autism and I'm pretty much proud of it. And also I have said I'm an open book, so I'm a person that does not mind talking about my experience because it's my experience. And also I pretty much say ain't nobody going to say it better than yourself, so I kind of did like that.
Okay. All right, so believe it or not, we are down to like 4 minutes. Now, because I recognize Suzanne, I'm going to say, Suzanne, do you have a burning question, or are you good back there? Hang on, we need a microphone, Suzanne. Thanks.
I don't have a really burning question, but I would just like to make a comment, if I may, especially to the Thomas Jefferson University student. Boy, it's so wonderful to see you guys here, because this is where people like you can really get a feel for things. But one comment that I would like to make is that very often people who go into the field of PT and OT don't really know much about people with disabilities. And from my experience as someone who's blind, whenever I've had PT or OT, I've actually had to teach the therapist what they needed to do because they really didn't know, and there's not a whole lot of literature. So good luck to you, and hope you have a great career, and thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Suzanne. So we are almost out of time, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists, Bill, Lisa, Z, and then Durand, if you could sum it up with one tip that you would like to share with this audience for advocating as we move forward, as we leave here today and go back to our own communities. Okay, Z, go ahead. One tip.
Since Lisa took the one about telling your story, I'll go with my other one.
Okay.
Is make sure to understand why you're meeting with your legislator. Like, legislator understands your goal, making sure you set the goal and understand why you want to achieve it. And also make sure that the legislator understands that goal by following up with an email, pretty much telling them that this is why I'm meeting with you and this is why this goal is very, very important. And also making sure you're confident and telling them that this is what I want and this is kind of what I need, and making sure that they understand your story.
Thank you. Bill, what do you got down there?
I say just be yourself, get to know your legislature, what they're about, their history behind them, what they stand for, because you can make them or break them, because you're the ones that put them in the office. You're the ones that can take them out of the office. So if they don't agree with you, they don't have to agree with you, but you could tell them, I'm a voter. People like myself vote for you. So I'm just going to tell people what you said, so they know they can vote for you or decide themselves if they want you in or you're out of here.
Thanks, Bill. Lisa?
I would say this was actually told to me by our director, Alan Holdsworth, and he said, never ask someone a question that they can't agree with you. So, for example, if I went to my legislator and I said, do you believe that the disability rights movement is important enough to be taught in school? I doubt anyone would say no.
Thanks, Lisa. And I want to thank my co-moderator, Durand, today, and all of these panelists for being with us and sharing their stories. And thank you all for being here today. Please stick around for the legislative hearing.
Thank you.